While global headlines focus on AI breakthroughs, electric vehicles, and energy revolutions, a quieter and far more strategic shift is unfolding beneath the surface. It's not about software or even innovation. It's about control. Deep inside the global supply chains, in places the average consumer never thinks about, lie the raw materials that power every chip, screen, battery, and magnet of modern life. And there's one player who controls nearly all of them: China. With over 80% of the world's rare earth refining capacity, China has positioned itself not just as a manufacturer, but as a gatekeeper of the future. Meanwhile, the U.S. finds itself on the defensive, caught in a technological arms race without the raw ingredients. The consequences? Massive. Because without access to these critical materials, even the most advanced American companies, from Apple to Lockheed Martin, are forced to play by Beijing's rules. This isn't just about metals, it's about power, and it's already reshaping the global tech hierarchy. Welcome to Geo Capitalist, where we decode global wealth, one power shift at a time. Today, we're unpacking how China controls the future of U.S. technology and quietly handed power to Huawei. What really happened behind the scenes? What does it mean for America's tech future? And why is no one in Washington willing to say it out loud? Subscribe, and let's get into it. For years, rare earth elements were treated as a technical footnote. Obscure names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium buried deep in scientific papers. But as the world electrified, these elements became indispensable. They're in every EV motor, wind turbine, missile guidance system, and smartphone antenna. And while the U.S. once held a lead in rare earth mining, it quietly let the refining slip away. China didn't. Beginning in the 1980s, Beijing subsidized extraction, funded metallurgical research, and undercut global prices until it became the world's rare earth refinery. Today, over 80% of the world's refining capacity flows through Chinese plants. And that number doesn't just reflect dominance, it reflects dependency. When Japan challenged China over territorial disputes in 2010, China cut off rare earth exports overnight. The message was clear: whoever controls the minerals controls the machines. And in 2025, that leverage is even greater. The U.S. Department of Defense has warned that rare earth supply disruptions could paralyze national security programs. Tech companies are stockpiling metals like they used to hoard chips. And Huawei? It's thriving under the very ecosystem built on these materials. The rare earth advantage is no longer invisible. It's strategic. And it's one the U.S. can no longer afford to ignore. While American headlines were dominated by bans, blacklists, and tariffs, Huawei was busy playing a different game, one that didn't rely on Silicon Valley's goodwill. After the U.S. government restricted Huawei's access to advanced semiconductors and software, many assumed the Chinese tech giant would collapse under pressure. But instead of folding, Huawei pivoted fast. It ramped up domestic chip design, built proprietary operating systems, and more importantly, secured guaranteed access to rare earth inputs, thanks to China's vertically integrated supply chain. Huawei's survival wasn't just about tech innovation. It was about upstream control. The company partnered closely with state-backed suppliers, invested in mineral exploration, and locked in contracts with African and Latin American exporters. While U.S. firms were navigating export controls and political red tape, Huawei was rewriting the tech playbook, securing energy, materials, and talent outside Washington's influence. Even in the face of sanctions, it managed to launch competitive smartphones and build out 5G networks globally. The irony? While the West tried to decouple from Huawei, it never decoupled from the raw materials that made Huawei possible. And now, many Western nations rely on infrastructure built or licensed by a company they once tried to erase. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a master class in strategic resilience. At one point, the United States had everything it needed to dominate the rare earth landscape. In the 1960s through the early 80s, California's Mountain Pass mine was the world's leading producer of rare earth elements. The know-how, the infrastructure, the talent, it was all there. But then came deregulation, globalization, and an economic doctrine that prioritized cost-cutting over resilience. As China ramped up subsidies and slashed prices to unprofitable lows, U.S. producers quietly shut down. By the time Washington realized rare earths were critical to modern tech, it had already forfeited the field. What's worse, the refining process, the chemical separation and metallurgical expertise needed to make rare earths usable was never rebuilt. Mining rare earths is only half the battle. Processing them is where the value and leverage lies. Today, the U.S. can dig the dirt, but it has to ship it to China for refining. That bottleneck is both economic and geopolitical. In times of tension, it becomes a soft power chokehold. In 2022, a bipartisan push in Congress sought to rebuild U.S. rare earth capacity, but progress has been slow, fragmented, and underfunded. Strategic planning has been replaced with reactive policy. And in a supply chain era measured in milliseconds, that delay could cost more than just market share. It could cost technological sovereignty. While Washington focused on banning Huawei smartphones and limiting chip exports, it overlooked the deeper foundation Huawei was quietly building, one rooted in supply chain control. Beneath every base station, fiber optic system, and 5G tower lies a web of components that rely heavily on rare earth elements. Magnets for signal precision, phosphors for laser communication, all refined in China, all flowing into Huawei's ecosystem with near-zero friction. This isn't about backdoors or spy chips. It's about leverage. By having secure, uninterrupted access to rare earths, Huawei could design hardware others couldn't match. Not because of innovation alone, but because it wasn't waiting on permits, clearances, or international shipments. It built vertically, with materials from its own backyard. And as sanctions squeezed Huawei's access to foreign chips, it adapted faster than expected, often by leaning deeper into domestic materials and engineering workarounds that U.S. firms couldn't risk trying. In contrast, American tech firms, from defense contractors to clean energy startups, found themselves navigating a maze of dependencies. Every attempt to decouple led back to the same problem, the supply chain. And at its core, Huawei's success exposed a blunt truth Washington never wanted to admit. In the global tech race, materials matter more than headlines. And China never stopped mining power. By the time Washington fully grasped the scope of China's rare earth control, the supply chains were already cemented. In a late but urgent response, the U.S. began pouring billions into domestic mining projects, processing facilities, and strategic stockpiles. The Department of Energy backed rare earth initiatives in Texas and California, while the Pentagon quietly funded startups like MP Materials to reshore key elements. But refining is a complex, environmentally delicate process. Even with funding, results are slow, and China still dominates the middle links of the chain: the chemical separation, the metallurgical conversion, the alloys. Worse, U.S. industry remains fragmented. Mining happens in one state, refining, if available, in another. Component manufacturing is often offshore. In contrast, China offers a one-stop rare earth economy, from mine to magnet. This integration creates both cost efficiency and resilience, something the U.S. supply chain lacks. Meanwhile, geopolitical friction only raises the stakes. Taiwan, South China Sea, and semiconductor tensions all amplify the risk of another rare earth disruption. The Biden administration has labeled rare earths a national security priority, but analysts warn policy declarations don't beat industrial ecosystems. America may have realized the game, but it's still playing catch-up, and every delay strengthens China's grip on the technological future. While Washington blacklisted Huawei and restricted its access to advanced chips, the company quietly rebuilt, not with lobbying, but with minerals. At the heart of Huawei's resurgence lies a hard truth. The very infrastructure used to constrain it still depends on rare earths refined by Chinese firms. And Huawei has doubled down. It's now designing its own chipsets, building 5G base stations across the global south, and even experimenting with satellite tech, all powered by an uninterrupted domestic pipeline of critical materials. The irony? Many of the components restricted by Western sanctions rely on magnets, lasers, and antennas made possible by the same rare earths that China controls. And Huawei? It gets them at home, faster, cheaper, and with full government backing. In 2024, the company stunned analysts by releasing a domestically produced 7nm chip, defying export controls and re-entering international markets. This isn't just a story of technological resilience. It's a glimpse into a new model where supply chain sovereignty is power. While the U.S. tries to choke off the top of the tech stack, China has secured the base, and Huawei is the proof. Because, in a world built on rare earths, the company with mineral mastery can outlast the one with patents. Faced with China's dominance in rare earths and Huawei's resurgence, the United States has launched a series of countermeasures, but most are years too late. From the Pentagon to the Department of Energy, agencies are scrambling to revive domestic mining, fund processing facilities, and build partnerships with allies like Australia and Canada. But there's a problem. The infrastructure isn't ready, and the environmental hurdles are steep. One proposed facility in Texas, meant to break China's grip, still lacks permits. Others face local opposition over water use and radioactive waste. Meanwhile, global demand for rare earths is surging. By 2030, the International Energy Agency estimates that demand for certain elements could grow sevenfold. The U.S. isn't just behind. It's racing uphill against a player who wrote the rulebook. And even when materials are sourced abroad, refining often returns to China, where cost, expertise, and scale converge. In 2024, the U.S. allocated over $800 million toward critical minerals. But compared to China's decades of state-backed investment, that's a drop in a geopolitical bucket. As one defense official put it bluntly, you don't win a supply chain war with pilot projects. So while Washington strategizes, Beijing operationalizes, and Huawei, again, quietly reaps the rewards. As the rare earth chessboard solidifies, the consequences extend far beyond supply chains. What we're witnessing is a quiet reshaping of global influence, one where material control trumps innovation. The U.S. may still lead in software, chip design, and venture capital, but without control over the elements that make those systems function, its power is precarious. Huawei's resurgence, once unthinkable under sanctions, is a symbol of this new reality. With support from China's rare earth ecosystem, it's not just surviving, it's scaling across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, embedding itself into the next wave of digital infrastructure. Even Europe, long dependent on US tech and wary of Chinese surveillance, is hedging. Germany has green-lit Huawei components in key 5G infrastructure. Brazil is in talks with Huawei for AI research hubs, and African nations, offered turnkey connectivity at a fraction of Western prices, are embracing Chinese tech, minerals included. The question isn't just whether the US can rebuild its supply chains. It's whether it can adapt to a global order where tech supremacy no longer guarantees control, where minerals, not software, draw the boundaries, and where Huawei, powered by China's strategic patience, may quietly shape the future the US once thought it owned. And there you have it. If you found this breakdown valuable, watch our next video. It connects directly to what's unfolding. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us decode these global shifts without compromise. Let us know in the comments. Is China building the future, or is the US giving it away? Either way, the world is watching. This was how China's rare earth empire took over US tech. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.